Hey folks, over the past year I've received several comments from people who watched the video in which I argued that the human digestive system is specialized for eating animal flesh, not plants. All these people were asking what happened to that amazing video. In a nutshell, the answer is I deleted it. And I deleted it because I realized that the arguments that I presented in that video are simply not correct. Indeed, if that video was amazing in any way, it was amazingly wrong, both factually and morally. In this video, I will explain why the evidence I discussed in that video does not demonstrate that the human gut is specially adapted to a carnivorous diet. On the contrary, that evidence indicates that humans have a gut most like that of highly frugivorous primates. But it has been specially designed for a diet consisting primarily of processed and cooked whole plant foods. In this paper discussing the alleged human gut adaptations to meat eating, the anthropologists Hladek and Paskett have shown that gut measurements of primate species do not support the contention that the human digestive tract is specialized for meat eating. In fact, the human gut has proportions and absorptive surface area indicative of an unspecialized frugivore capable of also eating seeds and meat. As shown in this graph from Hladek and Paskett, faunivores, also known as carnivores, have the least absorptive area per unit body size. Herbivores or folivores, that's leaf and stem eaters, have the most absorptive area per unit of body size, and frugivores lie in between. The red arrow here points to the encircled human ratio of absorptive mucosa to body size, which nearly perfectly fits the frugivore ratio line. Our gut absorption surface area is smaller than that of herbivores and larger than that of carnivores. To explain, leaf-eating herbivores need a very large gut absorption area because leaves have very low energy density and very high fiber content. Since meat and fat have no fiber, much less water than fruits and vegetables, and a very high energy density, carnivores need much less absorptive area than herbivores. Since fruits have an intermediate energy density, greater than leaves, but less than meat and fat, frugivores need an intermediate absorptive area. Our frugivorous gut gives us our remarkable dietary flexibility, enabling us to eat and enzymatically digest both energy-rich whole plant foods, such as seeds, and meat. This dietary flexibility is what confuses so many people. Hladek and Paskett also provided this graph showing that our ratio of cranial capacity to body mass is most similar to the highly frugivorous monkeys and apes, whose brain-to-body ratio far exceeds any carnivorous primate. In other words, frugivorous primates, especially humans, have larger brains relative to body size than any carnivorous primates. Unlike herbivores that have guts designed primarily for fermentation of large amounts of fibrous leaves, such as cattle and sheep, frugivores have guts primarily designed for enzymatic digestion of botanical fruits and seeds, some of which contain large amounts of protein or fat, such as peas, coconuts, avocados, almonds, sunflower seeds, and others. Since a frugivore has the ability to enzymatically digest foods rich in protein and fat, a frugivore can digest animal flesh, just like a carnivore. Since both carnivore and frugivore guts lack the large fermentation vats found in herbivore guts, they appear in many ways similar. This superficial similarity between carnivore guts and frugivore guts unfortunately leads many people to make the mistake of thinking that humans have a gut specifically designed for eating animal flesh. However, since frugivores descended from a lineage specializing in acquisition, digestion, and metabolism of fruits and vegetables, all natural frugivores have a dietary requirement for nutrients found most concentrated in fruits and vegetables. For example, primates, including humans, have a dietary requirement for vitamin C. No non-human carnivore has a vitamin C requirement. In fact, if we had the same ability to produce vitamin C as found in non-human carnivores, our liver would make about 2 to 4 grams of it daily, which is about the amount that a free-living non-human primate, similar in body size to a human, would consume in a day from fruits and vegetables. In the absence of dietary fruits and vegetables, one will fall far short of what may be the optimal intake of vitamin C and associated phytonutrients. The fact that, unlike the carnivore liver, the human liver does not produce vitamin C serves as evidence that humans are designed by nature for a whole foods, plant-based diet. Data collected by primatologist Catherine Milton indicates that human gut proportions are nearly identical to those of the very highly frugivorous spider monkey, which obtains on average 75% of its sustenance from fruits. In both humans and spider monkeys, the small intestine forms 62% of the gut, with the remainder roughly evenly divided between the stomach and colon. You can see that neither the orangutan, the gorilla, nor the chimpanzee has a small intestine occupying this proportion of the total gut. In fact, in 2017, researchers reported that we and our primate cousins may owe our big brains primarily to eating sugar-rich, fruit-based diets. The researchers reported, quote, "The results presented here are consistent with a range of ecological and developmental hypotheses centered on frugivory, including 1. necessity of spatial information storage and retrieval. 2. Cognitive demands of extractive foraging of fruits and seeds. And 3. Higher energy turnover and enhanced diet quality for energy needed during fetal brain growth. Together, it seems that frugivory not only provides selective pressures on cognitive processing, but compensates for the losses of a metabolically expensive brain via facilitating higher energy turnover and or lower energy allocation to digestion. End of quote. In other words, a frugivore needs a larger brain and more intelligence than a carnivore for 3 main reasons. First, a frugivore needs to be able to recognize and memorize what flowering plants produce edible fruits, as opposed to, for example, poisonous fruits, and also when those fruits are in season. Second, a frugivore needs to be able to memorize what pathways through space he needs to take to get to and from the locations of those foods across a large range. Third, a frugivore has to figure out how to extract the edible parts of fruits and seeds from their natural packages, such as removing peels and shells, and including using tools to open hard shells and otherwise process the plants before eating.
In turn, fruits supply the carbohydrates, the sugars that a large-brained frugivore needs to fuel foraging across the large range and support the growth and function of the brain, which is the largest single consumer of total energy and specifically glucose sugar of all body organs. The human brain uses about 20% of total body energy and 1/2 of all sugar energy consumed, and contrary to claims of some low information individuals, the brain absolutely requires glucose as a fuel. The evidence that the brain requires glucose came from insulin-induced hypoglycemia. Basically, during progressive hypoglycemia, nothing except glucose sources can reverse the cognitive impairment and progression to lethargy, stupor, and coma. Although the brain can metabolize ineffective substrates like ketones, blood-brain barrier transport capacity and their normal blood concentrations are not sufficient to deliver enough of these alternative fuels to the brain to support cognitive activities when glucose levels are inadequate. In the absence of dietary carbohydrate, the body uses protein as a primary source of carbohydrate to fuel the brain. The fact that the body will sacrifice protein, including muscle and organ tissue, in order to provide the sugar the brain needs only demonstrates how absolutely we require glucose. Even during prolonged fasting or glucose shortage, the brain still needs to get 40% of its energy needs from glucose. That glucose is obtained from 2 sources. 1, glucogenic amino acids from proteins, and 2, the glycerol component of triglycerides, commonly known as fats. It is well known that the brain only uses ketones as a fuel source when it's deprived of glucose. This is a backup system designed to provide energy for keeping the brain functioning even during starvation. Natural carnivores do not fuel themselves primarily with ketones. Wild wolves consume diets providing 54% of energy from protein, 45% from fat, and 1% from carbohydrates. They require this level of protein intake to produce sufficient glucose for reproduction. Cats are more carnivorous than canines. Wild cats get 52% of their energy from protein, 46% from fat, and 2% from carbohydrate. Cats and other carnivorous animals, including fish and birds, absolutely require this level of protein intake because they are more or less continuously in gluconeogenesis, that is, converting amino acids from their dietary protein into glucose. Not even the Arctic Inuit people fuel their brains with ketones. Their diet consists of very large amounts of meat, 4 to 8 pounds in a day, and on average they consume a very high protein diet consisting of 280 grams of protein, 135 grams of fat, and 54 grams of carbohydrate. This study found that Inuit on their usual diets are not in ketosis and are actually more resistant to fasting-induced ketosis than non-Inuit. Further, we have evidence that Inuit have a genetic constitution specifically adapted to their meat-based diet. This genetic characteristic appears to increase the metabolism of fatty acids and reduce glucose consumption by the liver and other internal organs and tissues. This genetic characteristic may enable the Inuit to conserve glucose for the brain and minimize ketosis despite living on a very low carbohydrate diet. Consistent with the evidence that both our digestive system and our big brain are adapted to a frugivorous diet, we have a growing body of evidence that the human brain functions best when supplied with dietary flavonoids. Dietary intervention studies in humans have shown that dietary plant food flavonoids are capable of improving both memory and learning by their ability to protect neurons, enhance neuronal function, and stimulate neuronal regeneration. The effective flavonoids are found in many plant foods, including sweet fruits, cereals, legumes, vegetables, herbs, and tea. Emerging evidence suggests that foods rich in these flavonoids and other phytochemicals may exert beneficial effects in the central nervous system by protecting neurons against stress-induced injury, by suppressing neuroinflammation, and by promoting long-term potentiation and synaptic plasticity. Since animal flesh is a poor source of these phytochemicals that protect and promote brain function and health, this evidence weighs against the hypothesis that the human brain is adapted to or designed for a highly carnivorous diet with low levels of these phytochemicals. On the other hand, this evidence supports the other evidence already discussed that both our digestive system and our big brain are designed to thrive on a diet rich in sugars, flavonoids, and other phytochemicals from fruits and other whole plant foods. Indeed, this is why all big brain primates, including humans, have a taste for sweets. All big brain beings need the taste for sweets to urge and enable us to efficiently find and choose the sugar-rich foods that we need to fuel our large, sugar-hungry brains. In contrast to primates, including humans, most natural carnivores, such as all cats, lack functional taste receptors for the sweet, umami, and bitter flavors. Carnivores do not require these taste receptors to identify their foods because raw meat does not naturally contain the compounds that are associated with these flavors. Thus, the fact that we have a taste for, enjoy, and crave carbohydrate-rich foods, that's sugar-rich foods,
indicates that we are specifically designed for a high carbohydrate plant-based diet, not a low sugar carnivorous diet. The encephalization quotient, or EQ, expresses the ratio between observed and predicted brain mass for an animal of a given size and is a proxy of intelligence. As shown in this table comparing brain development of various species, a white-fronted capuchin monkey has an EQ of 4.8, whereas the fox has an EQ of only 1.6, the dog 1.2, the cat 1.0, and the lion only 0.6. Thus, the frugivorous capuchin monkey has a relative brain size about 3 times that of the fox, around 4 times that of the dog or cat, and 8 times that of the lion. We humans have an EQ of 7.6, so our relative brain size is about 5 times that of the fox, around 7 times that of the dog or cat, and nearly 13 times that of the lion. Simply put, as shown in this table, among land animals, the frugivores, the animals that by nature eat the most sugar-rich diets, have the largest brains and the greatest cognitive capacity. The biggest brains are most strongly linked to high carbohydrate consumption, not meat consumption. Putting a point on it, nature shows us that the lion diet is for small-brained beings, not for large-brained beings. This really should be no surprise, since we know that a carnivorous, low or no sugar diet does not provide the premium fuel required for building and operating a big brain. At this point, it is important to note that whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds are all botanical fruits, all suitable foods for an unspecialized, flexible frugivore. However, it is not possible to obtain much value from whole grains and mature legumes unless one has the cognitive capacity to figure out how to process and cook them in order to access their nutritional value. This is where humans surpass all other creatures on Earth. We uniquely have the brains required to develop the technology needed to process and use these foods. And in turn, these foods provide the glucose and several other nutrients that the brain requires. Humans are uniquely fit to process these starchy fruits, and these fruits are uniquely fit for human food. Humans are often said to be omnivores because, like many other frugivorous primates, free-living humans can be found eating both plant and animal matter. However, without the ability to process and cook foods, we could not eat the fruits, grains, and legumes that are the major nutrient sources in modern human diets. In fact, grains and legumes form up to 70% of modern human diets. This is one of our unique features. Unlike any other species, we specialize in eating cooked and processed plant foods. Therefore, we are not omnivores, but cucinivores, eaters of foods from the cucina, or kitchen. We have smaller teeth and jaws and weaker mastication muscles than compared to non-human primates or carnivores. These indicate we are designed to eat foods that have been softened by processing and cooking. In the video I removed, I argued that the reduced total gut volume and colonic volume of the human gut indicated a design for a meat-based diet. But Furness and Bravo explain why this characteristic more likely indicates that our gut is designed for a diet consisting largely of processed and cooked whole plant foods. They note that the human colon is not as compact as that of the highly carnivorous dog, nor as large as that of the omnivorous pig. Further, hindgut absorption of short-chain fatty acids supplies only 2% of maintenance energy requirements for dogs, 6 to 9% for humans, and 10 to 31% for pigs, confirming that our colon is neither that of a carnivore nor that of a highly herbivorous omnivore. Instead, the human colon is specifically designed for a diet largely composed of processed and cooked plant foods, such as cooked grains, beans, and starchy tubers and roots. As shown in this graphic, which I modified from one found in the paper by Furness and Bravo, the human gut is smaller than that of the pig, but larger than that of the dog. Further, the colon comprises a much smaller proportion of the gut than in the pig, but not as small as in the dog. By nature, the pig eats a primarily plant-based omnivorous diet, and the dog eats a primarily animal-based omnivorous diet. We differ from both of these types as we are designed for a diet composed primarily of processed and cooked plant foods, foods from the cucina, or kitchen. Further, the human colon has haustra, or pouches, along its full length. Haustra increase the colon's surface area, allowing greater reabsorption of water from the colon. Haustra are found only in animals that naturally eat a plant-based diet. Since plants have a high water content, animals that eat plant-based diets need this extra surface area to absorb enough water from the residue of digestion to produce a semi-solid stool. Carnivores don't have or need this extra colonic surface area because an animal flesh diet produces digestive residue that has a significantly lower water content compared to plants. Haustra explained why constipation is one of the most common complaints for people who eat a very low carbohydrate diet. In this randomized trial, Westman and colleagues, who are proponents of low carbohydrate diets, reported that more than 50% of the people that they assigned to a low carbohydrate ketogenic diet reported suffering constipation. The haustrated human colon is designed to remove a lot of water from the very moist residue of a plant-based diet in order to form a soft, semi-solid stool. On a diet consisting largely or exclusively of animal flesh, the large surface area of the haustrated human colon tends to remove too much water from the stool, resulting in dry stools that are hard to pass. On the other hand, lack of dietary fiber to absorb some of the water in the colon can also result in diarrhea, experienced by about 41% of those assigned to eat a low carbohydrate ketogenic diet. Based on this comparative study of stomach acidity, I previously argued that the acidity of the human stomach provides evidence that the human gut is specialized for eating animal flesh. This study compared the stomach acid levels of modern humans to those recorded for dozens of wild animals. The authors reported that modern humans have a stomach pH of about 1.5, which is comparable to highly carnivorous animals, particularly scavengers. However, when I made that argument, I unfortunately did not realize that this study did not provide unequivocal evidence that humans have a stomach adapted to meat eating, because we have reason to believe that the high stomach acidity of modern humans is pathological, not natural, and primarily due to modern lifestyle and diet, particularly consumption of salt. That paper on the evolution of stomach acidity cited 2 studies that found a very low pH in human stomachs. This first one used young, healthy North American men and women as subjects. The other study reported the gastric acidity in healthy, elderly North American men and women. Both of these studies examined people living on typical modern diets. Therefore, this study compared the stomach acid levels of modern humans eating typical modern diets to those recorded for dozens of wild animals, none of which eat typical modern diets. There is a major problem with this. None of the wild animals ate modern diets containing salt, but all of the human data was taken from people who were eating heavily salted modern diets. This is important because dietary salt is the primary source of chloride, the ion that produces hydrochloric acid in the stomach. The US CDC reports that 89% of people in the USA in 2009 to 2012 consumed an excess of dietary salt. The mean intake of sodium was 1,730 milligrams per 1,000 calories. Given that the typical US sodium intake is 1,730 milligrams per 1,000 calories, and that salt is only 30% sodium, we can calculate that the typical individual is consuming 4,325 milligrams of salt and 2,595 milligrams of chloride with every 1,000 calories of food. Since most people eat more than 2,000 calories per day, the typical individual is consuming about 8,000 milligrams of salt and 5,000 milligrams of chloride every day. It is impossible to get this level of dietary chloride intake without the consumption of salt. Wild animals produce their stomach acid levels without salt intake. But in modern humans, stomach acidity is strongly influenced by salt intake because the human stomach uses the chloride from dietary salt to produce hydrochloric acid. Chemist Carl Sporek explains, quote, "The only strong acid in the digestive system is hydrochloric acid derived from salt, and it has the strength to irritate, inflame, and eventually destroy the delicate internal tissues. Certain mucous membranes in the body have the property of separating the sodium and chloride ions from salt by the ion exchange process. This is the only possible formation of hydrochloric acid in the stomach or anywhere else in the body. Excessive amounts of salt in the diet will cause the formation of excessive quantities of hydrochloric acid in the stomach and will lead to the creation of the common ailments associated with hyperacidity. This condition has many unpleasant and dangerous consequences, cancer representing the final stage. And to obtain relief from it, in most cases, neutralizing agents are used, antacids. Anti-acidity medications represent the largest sales volume of over-the-counter drug preparations in the USA. Indeed, the global antacid market was $8.5 billion in 2019 and is expected to reach nearly $12 billion by 2027. This is a clear sign that modern people suffer from too much stomach acidity. About 20% of the population of westernized nations has gastroesophageal reflux disease, or GERD. A systematic review estimated the prevalence in the U.S. to be between 18 and 28%. However, the true prevalence of this disorder could be higher because people have access to over-the-counter medications, so they don't consult their physicians and hence never get counted in the statistics. According to the Healthcare Cost and Utilization Project of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, up to 60% of the population experiences GERD at least once a year, and 20 to 30% suffer it weekly. Furthermore, in 2005, there were more than 3 million hospitalizations with a primary or secondary GERD diagnosis. Evidently, the high acidity of the modern human stomach is associated with upper digestive tract disorders. This suggests that the high stomach acidity of modern people is a consequence of the highly salted modern diet, not a healthy, natural human characteristic. Since modern humans are clearly suffering from gut damage related to high stomach acidity, it is likely that the human stomach is not designed to have such high acidity and therefore is not specially adapted to eating animal flesh. Among non-human animals, only those that eat plant-based diets seek out salt licks. This is related to diet. Non-human animals that eat plant-based diets consume about 20 times more potassium than sodium, whereas non-human carnivores consume only about 5 times more potassium than sodium. This is because animal flesh naturally contains less potassium and much more sodium than whole plant foods. In other words, animal flesh is salty compared to plant foods. Of interest, no natural carnivore craves or even can taste salt. In my 2016 book, Powered by Plants, I explained, quote, "Animal flesh contains significantly more sodium than fruits and vegetables. Since all mammals require sodium, those that eat plant-based diets have a tendency to sodium deficiency, while those that eat flesh-rich diets have a tendency to sodium sufficiency or excess. Hence, among animals adapted to plant-based diets, natural selection will favor those individuals who have a strong detection of, attraction to, and sense of pleasure from the salty flavor to prevent sodium deficiency. On the other hand, among animals evolving on flesh-based and therefore sodium-rich diets, natural selection will favor individuals who are indifferent or averse to the salty flavor to prevent sodium excess." In his book, How Dogs Think, psychologist and world-renowned expert on animal behavior Stanley Coren comments, quote, "Humans and many other mammals have a strong taste response to salt. We seek it out and like it on our food. Salt is needed to balance our diet, and there is not much of it to be found in vegetables and grains, or any other botanical fruits. Dogs, however, are primarily carnivores, and in the wild, most of their food is meat. Because of the high sodium content in meat, the wild ancestors of dogs already had a sufficient amount of salt in their diet and did not develop the highly tuned salt receptors and salt craving of humans." End of quote. Similarly, whether sodium deficient or not, cats show no taste preference for sodium-rich foods. Cats or canines eating their natural diet of meat have no need for sodium detection or preference because their diet inevitably provides sufficient sodium. Conversely, the fact that we have highly tuned salt receptors and salt cravings demonstrates that we have a physiology adapted to a diet of foods that contains very little sodium, and therefore lots of plants and very little, if any, flesh. To the point, if humans were carnivores by nature, most likely we would, like other natural carnivores, have no taste for salt. That is, no taste buds that even detect salt. So the fact that humans have salt taste receptors and typically find the salt taste pleasant provides evidence that we are designed by nature for a plant-based rather than an animal-based diet. So in conclusion, and to reiterate, I deleted the video in question because I realized that the arguments that I made in that video are incorrect. Contrary to what I claimed in that video, the human gut does not have features unequivocally indicating that it is specialized for eating animal flesh. On the contrary, as I had argued in Powered by Plants in 2012 and in 2016, the preponderance of evidence indicates that the human gut is most like that of highly frugivorous primates such as the spider monkey. This gut design of an unspecialized frugivore gives humans the ability to process fruits, vegetables, seeds, and yes, even meat. However, our relatively weak facial musculature, our relatively small teeth and jaws, and our gut proportions all indicate that we are specially adapted to the consumption of cooked, not raw, plant foods. Moreover, as I had demonstrated in Powered by Plants, we have many other heritable anatomical, physiological, metabolic, and biochemical features indicating that we are primarily designed for acquisition and processing of whole plant foods. And we lack the features expected for a creature primarily adapted to eating animal flesh. These features are found not only in our digestive system, but also in our sensory, locomotive, manual, reproductive, metabolic, and cognitive systems. We are by nature powered by plants. How I got so confused about this by 2017, leading me to stupidly deny reality and argue that humans are by nature hypercarnivores, is a topic for another time. If you want to read Powered by Plants, you can download a PDF copy of the 2016 edition of Powered by Plants from my website. On 8.5 by 11 pages, the book is more than 300 pages long and fully referenced with a 21-page bibliography. I've provided a link in the description box below. Thanks for watching.